Good day and welcome community to our talk about COVID-19 and vaccines. Most of us in the community are confused or do not have a clear biblical stance when it comes to the pandemic and the vaccines and how we should go about and saan na to ni pag-atubang and the decisions we're about to make. So this is the stance of the community and para sa to be guided as well for us to find what is the truth when it comes to the Bible o pag-abot ana pag-apply when it comes to approaching sa decision making na to have the vaccine, to approach unsay tan-aw nato pag-abot sa pandemic and our a proper ground of understanding from the Bible in order for us not to be led astray by different messages left and right. So for this, most of the sources that we have are a combination, majority is a combination of biblical verses that guides us particularly about the end times or revelation for us to have a basic framework aron dili ta maliba basta-basta. And then it is also a combination about research and history para kita mag-guide throughout how we are going about, especially as we are usually connecting kaning COVID-19 nato with the end times. So I hope and I pray that we tune in to every slide and for us to be guided kanitanan sa ato ang talk. So let's get right on sa atong talk. So first things first, ang first question nato and usually what comes to our mind whenever we tackle kind of issue is why is there COVID-19? Nganong na COVID-19, nganong na pandemic, nganong na in-ani na situation where we are faced with quarantines and deaths and vaccines and many different things. So ang first na to we must understand is kani the reality is pandemics do happen. Nakikitabo dyan ng pandemics. It's a normal cycle throughout history, meaning daghan kaayog mga different diseases and sicknesses which has caused quarantines and lockdowns and even deaths and grabbing hospitalization and grabbing paglugmok sa economy. Some are focused on specific areas and some are global scale. So apil diha multiple sicknesses na pod and diseases na much more than ang grabe pa ang effect kaysa COVID-19, which is ang Black Plague, which caused at more than 20 million deaths during its time. And di lang ka na nag-mutate siya into different diseases as well. Ang Black Plague it happened in 1300s and then even leading to the 1600s na Great Plague of London, which despite 100 years later, variant gihapon siya of the Black Plague according to many who have studied kind of disease, and it caused more than 70,000 deaths. So ato pa, there's much more worse na mga sicknesses throughout history than the COVID-19. And there's also those who last longer. Until now, wala pa na eradicate. Until now, wala pa na wala, which is the third plague, which happened more than 100 years ang iyang time. Though dili siya na widespread in a global scale, but dugay siya na human, more than 100 years. So it spread throughout China as well and many different parts of the trade routes during that time. And we also have currently karon kaning HIV and AIDS, we still have that. Wala pa tay cure ani, wala pa gyapon ta na human ani, although limited lang siya onset because ang pag mode of transferring sa iya dili pareha sa COVID-19. But it's more than 20 years. Dugay na kayo nito na ginabattle ang third plague more than 100 years. So naay mas longer o naay mas grabe kaysa sa COVID-19. Okay, so kanang klaro na to that in reality pandemics do happen. Okay, second na to reality that we must understand that the COVID-19 pandemic depends on which of the two groups you belong to. So ang meaning ana, it depends on two groups. Are you number one, those who put their trust fully in Jesus? So lahi ang meaning para sa ato And number two, those who do not trust Him fully. If there is no slightly trusting or 50% lang or less than 100, there can only be full or none at all, or having any room for distrust is a distrust altogether. So klaro na ko, either you follow Him 100% or you don't follow Him. And walay middle ground because we cannot merge two meanings together. Either you trust in God, in a God nga that can still work maski naay COVID-19, or you don't believe in Him and wala siya sa picture and therefore a meaning is different for you. So for those who trust in God fully, the glorious reality in heaven and the mission here on earth remains the same. Despite na ay pandemic it does not change. Ang plan sa Ginoo, it still holds. Ang iyang purposes, it does not come as a surprise. Again, if ang qualification na to, grabe ang COVID-19, na ay mas grabe in terms of deaths, and na ay mas dugay kaysa COVID-19. And so, it dili mag-justify ka ng reasoning nato nga pinakagrabe na ni. Though ang lockdowns na to mas grabe, and technological age karon lang niabot sa technological age na grabe kay in this scale, but this has happened multiple times before. However, ang aton dapat understanding for those who trust in God is that each day is a day nearer towards the moment our Lord Jesus returns, even without the pandemic. With or without the pandemic, we are a day nearer every single day. So ugma is another a day nearer towards the end, and then the following week is a 1 week nearer. So natay dapat na framework na mindset, and therefore we must stay awake. Kinahanglan ta open atong eyes towards what is happening in the world. Di ta maging ignorant, but we have that mindset of continually working. Thus, we must continue to be faithful, abiding in God, and abounding in good work. Regardless with or without pandemic, we must continually abide in God and magpadayon ta sa atuang good work. Ang Hebrews 10 nag-remind sa atua, not neglecting to meet together as is the habit of some, but encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day or the last day drawing near. So, nagpaduol ta diha, must continue to do kanang atong kailangan buhaton. So for those who don't trust in God, it may mean different things. So lain para sa ila. Sa uban sa ila, it could mean economic disaster, it could mean a political change, it could mean a loss of opportunity or gaining of new opportunities, it could be more time with family or less time with family. The definition differs depending on what is the most important aspect in your life, whether it's pleasure, entertainment, money, fame, or whatever. So if you don't put your faith in God, pwede kay ka maggrabe kay ang effect sa imo. It could be you no longer have peace, you no longer have security. So it mean many opportunity. Pwede ni dato ka tungod aning sakit, or pwedeng nawala imong kwarta or imong savings. It could mean many different things. So kanang one group, but there's the group of us. And I hope you're in this group, that you put your faith fully in God. So regardless na in COVID-19 or not, it's still the same. There are many changes, there are may tabo changes, but our mission is still the same. So why did God allow COVID-19? And magsugod ta with this tama na understanding. First and foremost, God is the only being who has the absolute right and authority to give and to take life however and whenever He chooses. Even si Job nakarealize na that he's naked as he came from his mother womb, and naked he shall depart. And despite whatever happens, blessed be the name of the Lord, because He gives and He takes away. He commits no mistake in any calamity or disease or loss. Naa siya anang right, being supreme God and being a being na whose ways and understanding and knowledge above ours, na di na ito masabtan, di na ito ma-figure out how He moves all these pieces. And COVID-19 is part of a piece sa iyang existence, and we must understand na He takes life whenever He chooses, however He chooses, holding sa iyang plan, knowing that those followers that He has, that ang life nato diri on earth is not the supreme value. So even if Christians do die or have sicknesses, we simply change locations in heaven. So we don't cease itong undang in our existence, but we switch location towards heaven. And because of that, mao na ang kanindot nato ginagunitan when it comes to His right and authority however He pleases pag-abot sa taking life away. Our faith is not based on riches, health, fame, power, connections, or anything found in this world. In fact, the Gospels record His constant reminders and prayers for His followers to endure and to have joy and peace in God. Mo ng prayer ni Jesus in John 17. Since God is the only constant being in this world whose plans and characters do not change, our trust and faith in Him remains the same despite COVID-19. He's still in control, will always be. He was still in control during the Black Plague. He was still in control during the Great Plague in London. He is still in control during mga multiple na mga plagues and sicknesses and diseases, and including now, He is still in control. Okay, though perhaps na-destroy yung peace, na-destroy yung security, na-affect ka economically, financially, spiritually, but He is still control. Laro na to na. So, pwede ka mangutana, what gistak na lang ta sa Ginoo, no? Ang katong cause why na sugod ng COVID-19. The answer is simply this: if God restricts us from exercising our freedom as a human being in this world, what we essentially want is for Him to stop being a loving God. Nganong mawala ang pagka-loving niya kung buhato niya na. What we're basically asking is for Him to turn us into robots that only perform one act, that is not loving at all. Meaning, if na anything na if siya pirmi mag-micromanage and mag-stop in every little act, every little decision, every thought sa itong mind, stop niya, may mutang robot. And he's not loving at all because gi-restrict niya ang freedom that we can make decisions on our own. We can choose what gives us joy, what gives us happiness, unsay mga butang sa itong kinabuhi. And that's what a proper relationship is, a loving relationship. Imagine that you go into a marriage relationship with anyone, and then immediately pagsugod pa lang is that mayon kasaya ha, every single thought, every single movement, every single thing na mo buhaton, kinahanglan mo i-list down sa kuha, then stop ka every time pag nakay buhaton dili tama. That's not a loving relationship at all. Okay? So, moto ta dili karon sa next naton argument on stopping results of the wrong actions. What if, though we make mistakes, stop na lang niya ang results of those actions, consequence which we suffer now because of our negligence towards not only pag-prepare against certain sicknesses, but also to eating or doing these things nga mag-cause of kaning sicknesses. If God does not allow consequences to occur from our bad habits as a society, which is dili lang kaning pagkaon o mga pagkaon na dapat dili kaunon, but He stops being just. He already has laid out His commandment and statutes in His word. To deviate from that, kumulayo tagikan siyang written word of how we must live, including how we eat, we open ourselves to pain and destruction, of which He already has warned us about. To not allow us to bear the consequence of our disobedience means He simply enables us to disobey. Meaning, dili siya maging just God, dili siya a God who disciplines, dili siya Ginoo nga that will allow us to learn. Pasagdan lang ta niya, and then every time that we commit sin or mag-go against ta sa iyaha, kay dili po ta niya i-discipline. Murag enabler lang siya, murag kabalo, murag analogy ana, murag naa kay someone sig pakay kwarta sa imo, and you know every single time mga siya kwarta sa imo kay palito niya drugs or alcohol, and then ikaw gyapon sig hatag, sige lang tagaan na siya, sige gusto kag any number of drugs, any number of alcohol, sige lang hatag lang, wala consequences of his actions. Dili, we must see or experience consequence as society, as a nation, if we deviate from the standard na gibutang diha sa Ginoo. So, there are many arguments against vaccination. Isa diha sa mga arguments is God heals or God protects us from sicknesses. Siya ang gaayo nga nang pa-vaccinate man ta. If dili na maabot sa tuwa or if naman na, He can heal. He is our healer. And we must understand na pag-abot sa throughout history, if di ka mo tuo about sa medicine, then you also forget a lot of things how God works in this world. Apil diha ang many examples. Ang isa ka pinakaklaro na example di Isaiah 28, which talks about God even through agriculture, siya ang nagtudlo how to plant. And pag-abot sa creation of food, siya ang nagtudlo about inana pod. Nakita na today, for history that instructed, his God teaches him, katong agriculture person, katong how to rotate the crops. Ingon sa Ginoo, actually, wala mo kabaluan di mo aware ani, but God's word is saying na ang discoveries itself, ang knowledge, ang what we discover through modern medicine, agriculture, and many different things, ang wisdom ana, ang inspiration ana, it's coming from the God of all knowledge and wisdom. Kitagaan tag wisdom in order to fight against that. So ang revealed wisdom sa Ginoo, gina-go through niya even to the farmers and even to the modern techniques. Verse 29 is about, this also comes from the Lord of hosts, He is wonderful in counsel and excellent in wisdom. So even Isaiah 28 acknowledges that. Ang second part is about bakery, about food, and then the first part is about agriculture. So even kani mga technologies na gina-discover nato, including vaccines, you cannot say that because this is from science or this is coming from modern science and medicine, na di siya mag-apply to a provision of God. No, that's not true. Because whenever we study the Bible, daghan kayo tayong makita Bible paired with medicinal solution. So not only God is the healer, but also God is the provider of the wisdom needed to create kaning mga medicines. In Genesis chapter 17, we see here na naay circumcision towards unsay proper na time kanu sa buhaton, kanus ang day dapat sa circumcision in the Old Testament time para mas hygienic for them, and ang timing towards the baby kanusa. So apil na sa ilahang law. Proverbs 17 talks about the importance of good medicine. Ang joyful heart daw is a good medicine. So naapod sila medicine that time. Jeremiah 30 talks about a medicine for the wound. In Ezekiel 47, it talks about medicinal leaves na ay mga leaves dito na pwede gamiton daw to heal, to cure a disease. And then Isaiah 38, naghatag dito og kanang combination unsa ibutang sa boils aron mawala ang mga burot-burot. It's a medicinal mix. The Bible approves of physicians. Genesis chapter 50 verse 2. Physicians or doctors or people of medicine. Si Joseph himself, when his father died, isugo niya mga physicians niya to help out or to prepare the body para embalming para sa iyang papa. So naapo na siya nga na element. If that's forbidden or di na siya pwede sa Bible, then nganong gi-allow to, nganong pangbuhat ni mga certain verses diri. This is not only in New Testament, Old Testament, but also in New Testament. Jeremiah 8, it describes there na there's also talking about physician. Nganong wala ba'y physician? Nganong dili man na maayo ang mga tao. So in Luke 5, it also tells there, Jesus saying, it is not those who are well who need a physician, but those who are sick. He also acknowledges na mga naisakit, they need to be healed. Na dapat na sila doctor. Of course, he is doing a comparison, an analogy towards himself as the great physician. So nganong gitawag sa linya na if dili na siya maayo, hindi na tama, if you don't believe in that. Luke, the writer of the gospel according to Luke and Acts, is a physician. Kita natin in Colossians 4, gi-mention si Luke dito being a physician. So all these things, if ang atong argument is ang vaccine is not God, is not coming from God, who are we to tell that? When throughout history, the Bible acknowledges that ang wisdom coming from agriculture, food, even medicine, and many different parts, it is God who gives as the one who is excellent in wisdom. Siya ang walay sama niya that he knows everything and he imparts the wisdom on certain times na gusto niya. So who are we to say? Basin di ay, if we make that argument, then we are actually not accepting the blessing of wisdom na gihatag sa ato sa Ginoo through the vaccines na nata. Another common argument that we have when it comes to COVID-19 and vaccinations and isolations and distancing is moingon uban, we give in to Satan if we do not gather. Dapat mo gather juta because if we do not, tuo ta sa mga plano sa enemy. Now, let us consider this. This is one verse that explains why we gather. Let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together as is the habit some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. The main reason why we gather as a community is for us to encourage one another, to pray for one another, to stir up one another, to make sure nga we address mga things that is happening and everything else. So, of course, ilang time there's no modern technology. Walay Skype, walay Messenger, walay Facebook, walay Zoom, walay everything else that technology has to offer. And therefore, ang options nila is only limited towards gathering. And even karon in some countries that restrict gathering, they still gather and then they meet the consequence. So if it's pag abot diri na butang, it's not really a black and white na answer. Meaning if you have the conviction na kinahanglan jud mo gather in a small group, practice mo distancing, but kinahanglan jud mo gather, it's your call. Mabitaw na gracious atong government that they allow at least man lang na a certain amount of people, but we have to understand that if we mulabag tana, mo go against tana, and then na ay repercussions, na ay consequences, na ay makulong perhaps, or na ay matagaan og fine, then Romans 13, we must accept whatever consequence na naana, because we know that, and part po na that we give honor, we give respect, we be subject to the governing authority. So whatever my mandate na kaning consequences nilabag mo, then we have to accept that, kaya dawato na. And it's not that the government is the enemy, but as the people who have been instructed by God, according to Romans, sila po itong kinahanglan mo implement sa law. They are God-instated people nga mag-implement sa law. And so, kinatadawaton po na consequence if we choose to decide to still gather despite the mandate. However, one thing is for sure, ang question nato diri kaning Hebrews 10 ba na pag-encourage, sting up one another, encourage, motivate one another, guide one another, train, disciple, fellowship, dili ba din nato mabuhat na sa mga modern technologies na ginatag sa tuwa? We all have internet, we all have technology. I mean, majority of us, except sa mga places which is lisod ng signal. But generally, for us, especially for us who are living in cities nga naanay kusog nga connection, naanay enough na internet for us to gather together online. And so, dili mag-factor in pag-abot sa Philippians 2, which is a command that we look not only sa atuang interest, sa atuang gusto, but also to the interest of others. If we endanger others through the consequences, to the fine, then maybe we are only looking towards ourselves and making it hard for others to also enjoy kaning atuang pag-encourage one another through online. So those are things that we have to weigh in. But ang klaro diri, not only mo tanata sa tong interest, but also mo tanata sa interest sa uban, and that ang whether it's offline or online, we must continue to encourage one another. So maski mag-meet online, pag encourage together one another, then we achieve that purpose. But even if you gamit mo tapok ta offline, but we do not achieve that purpose of encouraging one another, it's no use. So for us, we decided for the community na gipili nato that we follow through the government na mga mandates in order part of us pud, that is how we are contributing in helping to them. So nagapangita taglaing ways, that's why we have multiple different gatherings of different ages aron ma-meet nato na ma-encourage different age groups. So we are doing our best in the same way. We're also in preparation na lang pud for whatever that may come na changes throughout the new normal o mga different things na mabutay pa in the future. So another question na naadiri, why vaccinate, why practice distancing? So Matthew 22 reminds us, ang first great commandment is love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. Ang second is love your neighbor as yourself. And so, ang atuang framework in our justification sa atong decision nga nung mo choose ta ni mga decision making are hinging from these two things. Because number one, it is a loving thing to do. If we hasten the process of eliminating the disease through vaccination, also avoid spreading it to distancing, we exercise loving our neighbors. Dili atong sarili atong ginaisipan ni. But we do this in order to help eliminate kaning disease and also to stop it from spreading. Mo na mo pili ta to remain in our homes. To do distancing, that is our contribution. We are loving through that. That is our way of showing love to them, because it could possibly be ang unique ang disease na it could be ikaw ang carrier, despite you are a believer, you are a Christian, kasi pa mag-share ka sa gospel sa uban, but ikaw dito nag-cause o bigdala sa agent of death sa ilaha because of the COVID that you pass around. You are not loving if buhaton nimo na. For the current pandemic, is there any other thing we can do that is more loving? So mas grabe gyapon pag makashare ko gospel sila. Question, di ba din mo pwede ma-hit ang two birds with a stone, meaning ma-share nimong gospel while not exposing them to the risk through vaccination and distancing. So pangita tag unsay pinaka best way that we become the most loving to other people. The faster we transition to a post-pandemic new normal, the faster human na ning face na ni, the quicker we can resume or start more effective gospel sharing activities. Mo-open up na ta as soon as we reach certain vaccination percentages. Now, there are certain diseases na nasa certain threshold, nasa certain percent sa population na dapat na vaccinate. For measles, for example, I'm not sure exactly, but naasa around 96 to 98% na if vaccinated ang kadaghan, then mawala ang measles. Pag na-flu season, naasa mga flu shots. The more sila mag-flu shot, the more na mag-strengthen immune system, paspas na introduce ila, kaya na nila i-withstand. So, na mga certain percentages. Appeal na itong COVID-19. That's why we go to vaccine para paspas ta into protection para sa tanan, para maka-move na ta sa new normal. Pag move na tag new normal, gamay na lang kayo, the virus is dying. Pag dying na siya, mag-open up na economy, mas daghan na tag mabuhat in terms of sharing the gospel. Mas makadutag effective and unique, creative ways to share the gospel. So, paspasan na to para maabot na ta dito na point na ma-free na ta to move around and witness to other people. This is the only win-win situation for that. Ang challenge is, di ta mangita o di ta mag-resort to a win-lose situation. Win-lose meaning ikaw mupili ka, di ka pa-vaccine, di ka mag-distance, kay gusto ni siya yung gospel. Then if matakdan sila, it's a win-lose. Daog kasi mo part, nagibuhat nimo or you feel na ga-acknowledge ka sa command, which is to share the gospel to other people or to move around, to do ministry or whatever mo ginabuhat, but lose ang uban because you are not taking into account whatever they're doing. Ang lose-win pud pwede, daog-win sila kay kagawas, but na-limit po ka in terms of you being inactive in your faith. So it's a lose situation for you. So, by doing these things, vaccination and distancing, it's a win-win situation para sa tanan. In retrospect, balikan nato ni. Think about your attitude towards all these things. When have you shown gratitude in God's grace in providing us an abundance of medicinal options unlike in the pandemics of the past? You have to understand, grabe ang grace during this time. Nga naatay options of vaccines. Think about that. Katong mga grabe ka ng pandemics in the past, wala sila in aning options. Wala sila in aning grabing information spreading. Wala sila in aning quarantine plans, or wala sila yung mga daghan kay mga options for us to stop the spread. Sa ilaha simply magstay at home, because if makontract ka sa pandemic, especially itong Black Plague, makontract to in the morning, in the night time, you will die. You will go through grabe kay na fever, and then by night, di nakakitauma. Muna hadlo kay siya ng mga disease sa una, and wala kay choice. But, according to history, and according to history, not only sa tong history pa account, but even through medicine, ang almost always, because wala sila vaccine, the next best solution nila was always pag-abot sa quarantining, meaning katong mga lugar nga naisak ato, i-quarantine sila tanan, and katong mga wala pa, i-quarantine sila away from those na-infect na zones. That has always been the most effective. That's why we still exist. Ang human race, gawa sa grace sa Ginoon preserving us and His plans. That's why we still exist. Walay sakit nga nag-spread throughout everywhere niya, wala nag-stop. Because at some point, sometime, nag-quarantine ta. Whether it's quarantining through stopping it, or na-quarantine because katong na-infect, sila lang, nahurot, na-wipe out. Wala na pasa sa uban. That's one way of quarantine. Hopefully, ito maabot na point. Kung hindi ito mapag-igay, pag-ulo. Okay, so that's the reasons why kinahanglan tang buhaton naton. Now, let's go to the next few slides towards the theological attacks towards na mga questions o na mga certain areas nga pwede mo nakulbaanta in taking this because naatay mga apprehensions theologically. So let's address those. Ang first na question diri is vaccination is a mark of the beast. Na ay if you're not aware, nag-go around na siya nga na understanding. And part sila of the groups that are anti-vaxxers, meaning ka-anti sila towards the vaccine. And part of their justification is that ang vaccine is a mark of the beast. Now, first and foremost, before ko mag-go through ani, which usbuna po nako in the last slide that we have to understand, dili ni mga non-Christians lang, or di ni mga those who are in a cultic na denominations lang, but it may be perhaps the most sincere, the most loving people, brothers and sisters nato in the faith, are also believing in this. So I want to approach this in the most theological way possible for us to slowly absorb this og dili ta maliba, di ta malibog, aron we have a clear theological framework pag-abot sa kanina topic. Where can we see from the Bible about the mark of the beast? It's in Revelations 13. Majority dihatanan about the first beast and the second beast, the dragon, and all these symbolisms na ginahatag. But it's 16 to 17 that talks about kaning mark. It causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark. That is the name of the beast or the number of its name. And then later verse, ipakita diyan at the number of the 666. I-address na to later. But first, let's talk about the mark of the beast. Unsa na? Okay, first, kaya ito masabtan when it comes to understanding Revelations, interpreting it into our current times. Kaya ito sabtun, kanusa nagisulat, basically, unsay context ani. Revelations is a first century letter to 7 churches in Asia Minor. If tama ni mga Bible scholars, accurate ba sila, it's around in 90s na AD. Okay, so that's almost 2,000 years ago. Give or take, around more than 1,900 years ago. So ano na ni siya, dugay na kay ni siya nga text. It's not something new. So how do we get the context? Kanang context nato, it's HPCS, meaning historical context, physical context, cultural context, and situational context. Dagan ng context when we understand the Bible in order for us to fully understand unsay pasabot ani, because we are dealing with a manuscript 2,000 years ago sulat. So obviously layo na jud kay na culture nila, layo na kay na history nila, layo na jud kay ang situation nila compared sa atua. So history. Now, ang language diri ni John, as he's John the Beloved, as he is the writer of Revelation, in history sa iyahang time, this is a popular na ginabuhat. Ang deification, meaning deity, meaning ang emperor is regarded as a god after siya mamatay, and he is worshipped through the currency, through money, through trade guilds. So the emperor of the Roman Empire, so si Caesar, for example, si Caesar, he has a son, si Augustus, and sa ilahang time, according to history, according to historians, natin mga sources later on, that they have been called, nauso na sa ila, even si Nero and Domitian, na they are gods. Gods ang ginatawag sila as emperors. And then, even after sila mamatay, mag-una na tong thinking sa mga tao that kaning emperor na karon is a god and will be a god, na sa pambuhi pa siya, we will worship him. So, through even sa currency nila, sa kwarta nila na ang dagway dito sa ilahang emperor, and then na words dito son of God, like si Augustus, naka-inscribe dito kinsa sila that they are gods, they are deities, they are gods with a small g. So basically kana ilahang understanding that nasa the culture of whoever the emperor is, they regard him to be a voice of God or representation of God. So nabot ang point that ang currency nila, they have emperors and proclamation of their deity inscribed dito sa mga currency nila. So nahitabo sa una, whenever you would deal in the marketplace or makipag-transact ka, na yung mga trade groups or guilds which require participation in their feast. So, in honor kay Emperor Nero, for example, na sila trading circles, na sila business circle, na in order for you to join there, syempre, sa unang time, wala man sila kanang universal na currency. Okay, so whoever the strongest nation, dito na dawaton, ana. So, kung makipag-transact ka with other people who trade in the currency na nasa Rome that time, you have to join in sa ilang guild. And for you to join in sa ilang guild, naa sila mga festival sa birthday ni Caesar, sa iyahang anniversary, whatever, they give him honor and glory during katong mga moments na to. And if you want to do business, if you want to conduct business, if you want to join in sa ilahang time, kinahanglan po ka mo-appeal ato. Part na sa rule sa ilahang time. So if mag-conduct a business, some places mag-purchase ka, kinahanglan mo honor ka atong currency. Di ka mo gamit sa laing currency. Kato dapat na currency. If mo gamit ka sa laing currency, dako kayo ang exchange rate, lugi kayo ka, or di dawaton imong kwarta. So ang seal, ang pag-trading diri, buy and sell, historical context diri ni John is that kaning context niya diri, it's talking about sa iyahang time, it's something that is in connection with the practice of worshiping kaning mga emperors. It's not a specific sign, but it's a decision na buhaton nimo for you to join in para makatrade ka. So kana ang context ni John as he's writing this. So ang seal, it's symbolic or spiritual, dili na physical. Sa ilahang time, wala sila naitato si mga agtang o sa right para makatransact ka. But rather, it's a symbolic nga ginagamit to nimo currency, and you are participating in the feasts and in the worship of kaning mga emperors. Kana ang context ni John 3. So, it's not physical. In fact, this is not the first time John mentions a seal. In John 6, in Revelation 7, and Revelations 9. So, gipang mention actually ni John multiple times na. In also at mga letters niya. So, let's go through that very quickly lang. John 6:7, do not work for the food that perishes, but for the food that endures to eternal life. Which Jesus na istorya ni, which the Son of Man will give to you. But John is writing this. For on him, God the Father has set a seal. Now, question ako sa imo, for those who are believing in Christ, naabatay physical seal na nasa itong agtang o natasong right hand? Naawala. If we put our faith in God, naabalistay seal karon sa akong right hand ug sa akong forehead. Physical ba na siya na seal? Now, we go to Revelation 7. Do not harm the earth or the sea of the trees until we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. I heard the number of the sealed, 144,000 sealed from every tribe of the sons of Israel. The number of people who are coming from the tribe of Israel at the end times, naa ba sila seal? Naglakaw-lakaw ba sila with a physical seal sa ilahang body? Wala man, this is a spiritual mark. In Revelation 9, they were told not to harm the grass of the earth or any green plant or any tree, but only those who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. So, kita ba believers na abatay physical seal? So, actually, na-precedent ni. Dili ni siya out of the blue gi-mention ni John in Revelations. In Ezekiel, gipakita po diha that there is actually a sealing process po. But here's the thing. Tanan yung gi-mention ako diri, and even in Ezekiel, ang precedent na giset, it's not a physical seal, it's a spiritual seal. Kung basahon ni Ezekiel 9, the Lord called upon executioners of the city, and there was a man there in clothed linen, most probably an angel, a spiritual being. Kaya man niya mo paspas kayo mo travel, and he put mark kung kinsa tong ipang-execute. Okay? But there was no physical mark. It was a spiritual mark. And na makita lang ato are angelic beings and si God. Sila nagset og mark kani sila ang ipang-execute because they were going to execute the judgment of God to this city. Everywhere else, kani mga examples ni John are spiritual, not physical. Dili nanotechnology, dili naibutang, na chip, na microchip. And also history siya tagbalik-balik ani daghan kay sige ingon na ang SIM, ang national ID, we miss out on the theological understanding about these things that first and foremost it's not a physical mark. It's not something na mo run through our blood. It's not something na na-scan sa atua, na isulod sa atua dili na gamay kina chip or na dot. It's not that. So good dugay na kay na sige dugay na kay all throughout history medyo ulaw na 1800s pa lang pag-invent og kani, even karon na mga 5G na musulod sa imong body, whatever mga conspiracy theory, we must go back to the word of God unsay gisulti diha. And therefore, taking on the mark of the beast is a conscious and willing decision. The same way sa context ni John. It doesn't mean na ang revelations di mahitabo. It also pertains to something in the future at the end times. Murag, it's a mirroring na nahitabo sa una and will repeat itself in a different way. But for those who are awake, those who are noticing these things, mabantayan nato ang connections, ang similarities between what happened in the past and ang continuation towards what is going to happen in the future. But in the same way, si John is talking about pag mo join ka in ani, in order for you to transact in history, you must make a conscious and willing decision na piliun nimo na mo trust ko ani in order for me to be able to buy and sell and transact and participate in enjoying the pleasures of sin kaysa kay God. Therefore, you cannot get a mark unknowingly. Dili pwede. Gawas nga dili siya physical ang mark of the beast. Di ka pwede, hala natsambahan na ako yung nainom. Hala na ako yung natambal na drink na dito'y chip dito. Or hala na yung vaccine. Because there are so many arguments sa kan logic. In the first place, nga nung COVID na very ginabantayan na to siya. Di sila kasulod basta-basta og any chip or whatever. If gusto sila mosulod og mga other vaccines or mga mark isulod nila, daghan kay tag mga vaccines, even mga babies na gina-inject na to at a very early. Nganon di na lang dito because mas dali mag-spread and propagate ato na mga methods. Nganon diri pa. But that is a very logical argument na siya. But if mag-focus na ta theologically, di gyapon siya makalusot because ang getting a mark is a conscious, di ka pwede mailad. Kipapili jud ka between Christ and kaning mga benefits ani, and you chose to be there. So na spiritual mark, nagipili nimo to forsake Christ, to deny Christ, and to choose other things kaysa pilion ang Ginoo. It's something that you willingly chose. And so, because of that, ang argument na to nga pag mo take the vaccine na isulod sa atua without us knowing, that's a hard theological na argument because it's as far as John, the author, in terms of context, dili siya mag-sustain na argument, maglisod tag justify ana. In fact, pwede ta kinanglan nasa imuha ang argument karon how you can prove that, especially kanang mga arguments nato nga na nanotechnology na ginasulod ana. It's for you to prove na naa jud na because as far as as far as ginasulti sa nagbuhat, as far as theology, daghan kalaban everything else. So mahitabo ani whenever wala ta nag-side towards logical argument, wala ta nag-side sa theological argument og mga whatever, and then akay out of thin air nagabuhat og mga certain arguments, tawag na conspiracy theory. Nag-apil-apil na ta sa mga conspiracy theory that does not help our faith, does not help our decision making, and even does not help atong society as a whole. We must be careful of that. So natin mga sources diri, natin mga historian, si Pliny the Young, and there's also an author by the name of Keener, nagsulat about Revelations. He made an exhaustive study towards understanding Revelations. Di lang kani, but daghan pag mga other authors that support this argument. But as far as ako concerned, as far as ako na nag-learn about ani, and as far as kung based lang ta towards kanina argument and knowing the context, then we could make kanina mga conclusion. So there's also an argument na ang corona is created from or represents 666, and 666 it comes from atong verse 18 of the same chapter. This calls for wisdom. Ingon si John, nag-warning siya, let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. So we understand na taana na in terms of murag devil number na siya, or even in history murag kana ato ang ginatanaw towards that number. But there's also a growing argument na 666 yun na tanawa ra gyud ninyo numerology kanina mga letters, and equal do nimo na 6 letters. So, and then combine nimo 666. Actually, kung tanawon nimo tanan, almost everything in history, kung tanawon nimo, gusto lang jud nimo maabot og 666, daghan ni kag pwede mabutang into 666. That's why throughout history, notorious na ta mga believers ana, or at least kato mga Christians who love conspiracy theories, daghan na kay ta ginagamit na mga medyo ulaw na ta when it comes to those things. Natay mga conspiracy theory about 5G, about ang Pope, about ang Muslim leader, about the US President. Sa una katong si Ronald Reagan, because ang iyang name, tulo siyang name, Ronald Wilson Reagan, 6 letters each, so 666. So katulong time kami po ang backlash na muna ni siyang Antichrist, kay and then US finance, ang barcode na apoy, it's divided into the code for a 666. So ang US financial system daw, and then we have an energy drink nga katong 777 sa Monster. Tahan na lang, everything connects to 666. And then we make that jumping conclusion, hala, doon na jud kaayo mabalik ang Ginoo because nanay mga 666 taga na kay all throughout. Now, ang listed na argument when it comes to that is that if we only take verse 18 about sa 666 and disregard unsay nahitabo throughout 1 to 17, that's such a hard argument because as you know, basic kay ni when it comes to understanding the meaning of the Bible is di ta pwede mo pick out like isa ka verse and then i-apply na tanan. You have to take the whole context. It's very possible that we arrive to the wrong conclusion if mo go to the wrong na mga context, if di na tukwaon ni tanan. So that's why we have to be very careful about numerology, about using numbers to justify kinsa ang Antichrist, because daghan kay questions, daghan kay mga kinahanglan pa na criteria i-meet before ta makaabot ang conclusion. The whole book of Revelations particularly is a symbolic interpretation. Daghan about dragons, about horns, ngano of all those things, symbolic tanan, and then kanina himong literal dayon at the end. And out of all throughout history, 2,000 years, ever since gisulat ni, karon na time jud siya ni abot. How sure are you na karon jud ni siya moabot? Yeah, di pa siya ito ginatanaw. That's why, unless each part of it is addressed in the current time, it's very dangerous and misleading to make a conclusion. Daghang questions mag-arise. Verses 1 to 10, kinsa tong first beast? Kinsa ang dragon in verse 4? Unsay blasphemous gibuhat ani Antichrist in verse 6? Did anyone perform miraculous signs, even calling down fire? Verse 13. Could you no longer buy and sell unless you worship him? Verse 17. All these things sa kanina chapter itself. So we cannot draw simply kato just because na 666. We must be we must be careful atong hearts, atong understanding, atong theological framework, kay kung dili ta magamping magsige tag lead to each conclusion ay mo gawas ng bagong conspiracy, ambak din ta, maminaw din ta, katong mo ni tinuod, and then it fails, mugo na punta sa next conspiracy theory, and it fails again, mugo na punta all of our life. We become a clanging symbol, magsigilan tag ka ng murag tag noisy gong, murag saba tang instrument mga ta background niya. Parang sa di na kaayo mag logically make ang ato ang mga conclusions because we do not study the Bible itself. Wala ta naging fair when it comes to the contextual interpretation kaniya ni tanan. Now, there's also a growing argument nga nung di sila magpa-vaccine is that Christians will not get sick. I know, O Lord, that your rules are righteous, and in faithfulness you have afflicted me. Let your steadfast love comfort me according to your promise to your servant. This is not only the verse, but the verse in the Bible that shows God inflicting sickness, using sickness, di lang sa other people, but even towards His people. So, we are not immune. Kabalutan as believers, magkasakita. Naatay sicknesses, we know people who have cancer, we know people who have very terminal na mga illness, na mga uban, or accidents, kabalutan. It does not mean na nagka-cause ni sila, then it's because kulang ang ilang faith. That's a wrong understanding of our faith in God. If ang pinaka-importante in your life is ang imong health, mo ng basis of your faith in God, then you are worshiping health, not God. Because kung i-worship ni mong Ginoo, you will know nga kani mga butangan ni are things that happen to each and every Christian. Because as long as nato diri sa kalibutan, this world is subject to the enemy's acts for destruction, which includes sickness. He's very active in all these things. Although kaya niya buhaton na, kaya mag-bring in sickness to life, God will use that for His purpose. So, dili ma-obstruct ang plano sa Ginoo despite the sickness. But sickness too happen. Ang heaven or our kingdom nato is not here on earth. Our kingdom is in heaven with God. So let's understand that na dili kani ang pinaka-importante. If we die, we change location. We be with God for eternity. Christians can get COVID-19. Pwede. I know many people who died or suffered COVID-19 and they are genuine brothers and sisters in the faith. Possible na. Including all other diseases such as cancer. Okay? We must be careful in understanding or believing in a theology nga tanang Christians by faith dili magkasakit. That if you are faithful, you cannot get sick. And if nakaisala, then nagkasakit ka because nakaisala. We must understand that even throughout history, that is not a good argument, because if you study about the sicknesses that happen in the believers, including in the Old Testament and New Testament, nga na New Testament, grabe kay ang suffering that time despite they are faithful. Si Paul kept reminding me that your faith is encouraging me, grabe kay yung tabang, si pamugusing tabang, okay kay sa mga believers, and yet persecution, death, torture, and many things happen to them. In the Old Testament, the same way, Joseph and many others, niabot ang calamities, niabot ang evil deeds sa ilaha, because God has a plan. Gamiton niya itong mga diseases and sicknesses for His purpose. Then therefore, you cannot limit God and put Him in a box. Uy, nagkasakit ko, Lord. It means this, because ani ang pagsabot nako sa Ginoo, or ani lang dyan ang Ginoo. You cannot dictate sa Ginoo unsay plano niya based on unsay nahitabo siyang kinabuhi. That's why katong mga friends ni Job ato nahitabo ikasab-an ni God. Mali lang mga advice ginatag si mo because they keep insisting Job nakaisala. That's why nahitabo ni si mo kaning sickness ni nahitabo sa mo. And Job kept defending. So mali sila tanan. And God kept saying ayoko ninyo i-understand, ayoko ninyo i-diktahan unsa ang result of all the decisions I make. Dili ko ninyo kaya i-figure out. Okay? So, katong nahitabo, and kana ang stance nato if we believe in a theology nga dili ta magkasakit as believer if tarong latong kinabuhi. Even if you are the most faithful and good person, as long as you have here in this world, tribulation and trouble will come. Possible jud kayo na. Wala immune sa tuwa diri. However, for Christ followers, sickness, pain, suffering, and trials can either be discipline, so it could be discipline, possible po na. Again, I'm not crossing that out na pwede ka makakuha any sickness or any whatever because it's a discipline for you. Because maybe nakaginabuhat na sin, or maybe nakaginapabaya, na kay mga habits na kailangan i-stop, it could be that one. Or it could be a realignment, meaning niabot ni sickness because God wants to change the trajectory sa mong kinabuhi. You're going in a wrong way, i-divert niya towards a different place. So ang tawag na ko na realignment, gina-align sa Ginoo. And because many times if na ay danger to something that we hold dearest in our hearts, such as health, diya ka na time na many times na mutan out sa Ginoo or maminaw sa Ginoo. So that's one possible pod na reason why mabot na. Paglaro na ko diri, it is not a wrath. It is not wrath na nahitabo ni. Meaning, di ni siya judgment, ng condemnation. These verses remind us of that, na wala dili ni wrath sa Ginoo. We are not condemned by God. If we are truly His, so partly sa iyang plan sa itong kinabuhi, He will not condemn us through the sickness. Condemn meaning ilabay ta niya because of whatever niyang gusto. Simply i-show away kanya, ilabay kanya. Dili na siya inana. It's either discipline or realignment. Or it could be a retirement. It could be a retirement, meaning retire na ka from this earth and you will be in heaven with Him. So there's also an argument na kinahanglan na to ma-understand that this is a valid argument na ginabuhat sa uban, and we must be careful about as well. Obviously with vaccinations, and even dili apil sa topic na ni, but even kanang mga ginatake na to na mga ways to avoid getting pregnant if naga participate ta towards mag-stop for a time of pregnancy to protect the health of a woman. So we must also be careful towards sa mga medicines and vaccinations na ginagamit nato. So it is true, many of the vaccines introduced in our bodies are produced using fetal cells, meaning cells coming from babies. Tinuod na, it has been a practice dugay na sa modern medicine for decades na siya. However, the individual human cells used for some vaccines development today are not and have never been part of an actual human body or fetus. It's not true nga 10 years ago ni bata nag-abort or 5 years ago mo itong gigamit to use in this vaccine now. It's not true. Di na siya tinuod. It's never been part of a human actual body, but it is part of something that has been kept alive, tawag an immortalized cell line. So, na mga fetuses gi-abort during 1960s and 70s or na-terminate or namatay ang baby, kuha dito ang cell and kato gi-study, gi-analyze, gi-learn, and then gigamit dito kato immortalized na cell ato gigamit in order to produce the vaccines para ma-introduce atong body. Okay? So the circumstance of the original abortions are often unknown. In fact, some cell lines may be derived from a miscarriage. Possible po na. New recent cell lines are not being used due to extensive process, regulatory approval, justifying need, cost for research. So, walay any new abortions karon na ginabuhat coming from that cell as far as I know, because di may pa-approve kay nganong nanami mga immortalized cell line na effective manitanan towards na mga flu shots, mga vaccine shots nato ginakaron and gikan dili pa. So there's no need to add more. So sa una, although we cannot rule out the possibility na naapoy uban na nasagol na cell lines that are coming from bodies na wala gi-approve o gikwaan sila og cell. Patay na sila obviously. Sa una, ang bodies na nabilin, or it's also possible that it's coming from fetus, aborted and miscarriage. Wala ta kabalo na. However, it does not mean that even if evil thing or ang pagsugod ato is not justified, na dili ni magamit as something good. In the same way kay Joseph that he reminded his brothers niya, though you meant evil against me, God meant it for good, for the saving of many lives. Mao nang giningon ni Joseph that it could have a double effect. And so, walang takabalo. I mean, this would naka-trace for us 50 years ago. Saan ito pag no? Kaning mga specific cell line ba? Pure ba ni siya? Di ba ni from aborted baby? Wala tayo way to know. I mean, this would nakaayo for us to do that. Although there's a growing movement na, especially sa mga anak na to, mga babies na to, pag mag-take sila vaccines na ang parents can choose unsay mga certain vaccine. In the US, very meticulous sila na niuban Christian groups ginabuhat na di ko mo gusto vaccine na coming from online. So, isa-isahon na yung mga groups na mag-research kanina vaccine, asa nigikan, so justify pa nila na, so it's a very long process. So, in short, di na kani big deal. Di na kani big deal in case man na ay mo go ani na argument. Theologically, it's not really a big deal because even the Southern Baptist na mga ethics group, even mga Catholics group, mga religious group, mga medicine ethics group, they acknowledge this and they accept kanina mga realities pag abot sa vaccines. So what now? Since response nato towards all these things that I mention, number 1, observe social distancing, avoid large gatherings, encourage others to do the same. We must not go against sa kana because that really helps. Tako kay na siya na part of our loving other people if we follow that. Second, we be vaccinated. Unsay na available dihan options, we follow it and we make a sound decision on choosing the best vaccine because that helps. That is a loving thing to do. Encourage others to do the same. If ang imong local church leader or friend opposite ilang ginabelieve, useless ang pag-attack against their knowledge. Same exact nahitabo in 1 Corinthians 8, but it's about food being offered to idols. We must remember that nakana po na even kana na time naganpod kaayo na deceive or lahi lang understanding towards unsa clean ang pagkaon. So naiuban nagaingon bawal makaon ani, bawal makaon ana, but Paul was speaking justification, masipang tama imong stance that food offered to idols can still be eaten if prayed for, but it can be a stumbling block to other people. So instead na buhaton nimo na, you'd rather choose na di na lang in order not for you to become a stumbling block to them. So we must treat this subject delicately, meaning maging tactical ta in informing them and sharing them and teaching them. We must treat them as being a loving brother or sister in the Lord, sagsabot sa ilaan ng mga butanga, and carefully teach them the truth. Useless ka ng stance nga atakihon nato sila just because we are arrogant na mas kabalo ta or mas theological ta or mas tama ato ang stance according to the Bible. No, we are part of one body and we are also members of that body. Tabangan na tong other members of that body to have the right understanding. Next, continually make use of what technology allows us as far as continue sharing the gospel. Ayaw tag-undang in sharing the gospel. Ay tag-undang because kaniyang pinaka-importante na vaccine, Jesus Christ. He cures us and helps us from sin and the effects of it. And so kinahanglan ni sa tanan. So di ta mo undang just because na aning vaccine or wala vaccine, na distancing, wala distancing, whatever. We must continually working for the Lord and being faithful. And lastly, expect and be ready for more changes brought on by the new normal. So good pa lang ni, along with the continuous birth pains. It's better to be awake and constantly remind ourselves that we are living in the last days, because we must remember this, starting from the time na si Jesus nag-ascend until maubot siya balik, those are last days. Those are not literal days. So it could be 2,000 years, it could be 3,000 years, 4,000 years, 5,000 years, I don't know. But what we do know is, even if layo pa kayo to even si Paul sa iyang time, grabe na kayo nag-encourage, because ang mindset always should be na I must continually be faithful, live as if Jesus is really coming soon, because He is coming soon. So kana ang tama na understanding, and sama sa birth pains, as time goes by, many things, many pain, many changes, many obstacles, many challenges maabot. And daghan pag mga restrictions pwede maabutay, we don't know. But one thing we do know is that mas better tong prepared ta, mas better tong we are found to be faithful kaysa we are found to be not doing anything because we're just waiting. Dili, we continually be faithful in the task na gihatag sa tuwa sa Ginoo. And I hope and I pray all these things na nakatabang sa tuwa, in our understanding, in our framework, in our approach, dili lang sa vaccine and everything else, but even in understanding how the Lord works through the pandemics and the sicknesses. I pray that you are blessed. I pray that you are encouraged. I pray that some questions have been answered. And I hope and I pray that we continue on in seeking and learning more about the Bible, because it has the answers that we need in these times. I pray that the Lord bless you and continue to be with you even throughout the decision making nato in every decision that we make. I thank you. Shalom.